In the next few minutes, you're going to learn all about the Hercules DJControl Inpulse T7. Now, we've had this one here in the studio and in the school for a few months now. In fact, we've been teaching on this. So I know quite a lot about the ins and outs of this, what we think is good about it, what we think is bad about it. Ultimately, there are not many DJ controllers in what I would call the middle range. So you get all your beginner controllers and then you move up to your pro controllers. So you could pay 300 or you could pay 1500. There's not really very much in between. This is one of those controllers that is in between and it brings its own feature set. And the big thing about this controller, the big thing that's got everyone talking, it's got motorized platters. You've actually got a real motor inside there controlling these, spinning these around. They've got real vinyl on the top of them, real slip mats, and this is unheard of at the $700 or something price point that this is at, because paying hundreds, not thousands, for a DJ controller with proper spinning platters, as I say, it's a completely new thing. So obviously we're going to be talking about the spinning platters in this review, but also I'll be looking at the rest of the controls, which thankfully are very good if you're a software DJ. And we'll also talk about what it hasn't got, what we didn't like about it. By the end of this, you'll have a good idea as to whether this is for you, and I'll give you one of the only other controllers that's close to it in both price and features for you to compare it to. So first things first, this is a 2-channel controller, clearly with having paddles and Crossfader down here with a bit of space around it and motorized jog wheels, etc, etc. This is being aimed kind of at scratch DJs, or at least at DJs who like a motorized platter. And that's an important distinction right at the beginning, so hold that thought. Is it best for scratch DJs, really? Or is it best for DJs who, for whatever other reason, want a motorized platter? But that is clearly its target market. When it was released at the NAMM show in the States, it was the scratch DJs that were all over this saying, wow, have you seen that? So, cat out of the bag to begin with, these platters are fantastic. They are actually belt drive. There's a belt that you can see when you take this little thing off here. But they've got the torque. They just feel right. They're just fantastic. I don't think you would ever know they were belt drive unless anyone told you. So that's not too surprising really, because hey, belt drive turntables actually exist and scratch DJs love them. Here's an example here, because these kind of portable turntables, all the rage, right? So this is kind of the same tech in one of these. So that's the first thing. That's fantastic. Now the second thing is the software. So this works with Serato, comes with Serato DJ Lite, also works with Serato DJ Pro if you own that, and it works with DJUCED, their own software. We're not talking about DJUCED here at the Digital DJ Tips School. We don't teach DJUCED, however, it is a well-regarded, if niche, piece of software. Everyone's going to want to use this with Serato, so that is what we're going to concentrate on here. So the first elephant in the room then is it doesn't come with Serato DJ Pro. It comes with Serato DJ Lite. You are going to want to upgrade that. Serato DJ Lite is not good enough for anyone with more than a passing interest in DJing, and certainly for anyone buying something like this. More than that, you're probably going to want Serato DJ Suite, because that gives you the key change controls and more effects, but mainly the key change controls, which is another step up again. So it's a subscription or quite a hefty outright purchase. If you don't already own a license to Serato, and that doesn't mean that you've got another controller that unlocks it, it means you actually own a license. If you don't already own a license, factor that in if you want to be using this with Serato, because it is an extra cost, or as I say, an ongoing subscription. Okay, so that's cleared up. We've got a 2-channel, 2-deck controller for Serato, and it's actually got really good control over the Serato software. So for instance, you've got control down here over all the pads. Notice that the pads are multicolor and they light up nice and bright. So you've got control over here over all the pad modes of Serato. So hot cue, loop, stems, sampler, you've got saved, you've got loop roll, you've got saved loops as well as hot cues, and other stuff as well down here, including, quite important in this day and age, stems. So there is a dedicated stems control here, but also there's a stems instrumental and vocal button here, which just simply switches the stems on and off depending upon which one you press. That one there is just the vocals, that one there is everything else. However, to have them on separate buttons is a really nice thing, because it's the main thing you're going to want. The main thing you're going to want is a vocal so that you can mix something else over it, or the instrumental so you can mix a vocal in on the other deck, and so on. This is what we've been using a lot in the teaching. We're making, at the time of recording this, we're making a mixing with acapellas and stems course. link underneath. And so we've been using these a lot. Really appreciate seeing that on a controller. So as well then as the loop functions down here on the pads, you get an auto loop button as well, the auto loop knob as well, which adds the loop in and lets you move it around like this. To have an auto loop on a button is great because this is the way that you're most likely to use it. You know, you might have the stems set on here and be happily DJing away with stems and want to put a quick loop in. You don't have to switch away from stems mode to do that. I love the fact that's there, and I love the fact it's right next to the controls here. You're going to see as we talk through the controls how well thought through a lot of this stuff is. So another thing I really liked was the big two library buttons at the top. One for each deck, right where you're going to want it when you're loading the deck for browsing. They're just a really nice, they're a really nice knob. They're just pleasing to use, as are indeed the auto loop ones, and as are these filters here. They've got a nice heft to them. So these are all well thought out and cool. Then as well as that, we've got other controls which you sometimes don't see on cheaper controllers at this level, which is really big, long, accurate pitch controls. And I'd say most of the controls that you would want on a fully featured Serato controller are here. So you only have to look a little bit deeper to notice that you've got stuff like the pitch range change, which is not always on here. Key lock is on here as well, although there's no key shift. I'd like to have seen that. I'd also like to have seen a slip button as well, but that's not on there. You can open and close the prepare window here as well. We've already talked about the auto loop functions and the instrumental and vocal. One thing that's not immediately obvious is you actually got a pitch shift down here. So this parameter, it's great to have parameter. This is for altering the parameters on any pad mode you've got selected, but you've also got a pitch bend down there, which is good because motorized platters are a little bit harder to nudge. With a normal jog wheel, you just nudge the edge. You can't really do that on a motorized platter without it being obvious. So it's good to have those as well for just nudging stuff onto the beat, although you do have the sync button, of course. There's always a sync button on these controllers. So towards the center and towards the mixer, nothing unusual here. We've got double VU meters, both for the main and for the individual channels, which is nice. We have, as I mentioned, paddle effects here with dry wet and the ability to halve or double the effect length. These control the potentially up to 3 different effects inside Serato. So each of these is turning on and off a Serato effect. However, they all control everything. In other words, they're all routed to everything. So you don't have 3 for the left-hand paddle, 3 for the right-hand paddle. These are all on everything, right? So just bear that in mind. It's a simple way of mapping. It is kind of quite immediate in use, but you do have to get used to it. Don't think that anything you press here is only going to affect this deck, because that's not how it works. Now, being a Hercules controller, this has a set of controls to help you learn to DJ, which is absolutely great. Hercules have been a bit funky in the past with some of the extra things they've tried to put on to make DJing kind of more fun or more wacky or easier for beginners. But here they've got it just about right. So you have this beat match guide button here. Turn this on and then you get little lights on the pitch fader here telling you whether you need to move this one up or down to match this one. So this is really good when you're learning to manually beat mix because it gives you a guide. You also have beta line down here, which tells you the same thing, left or right, tells you whether you need to speed up or slow down. And as you're playing the track, up here, this is flashing with a red light to tell you the beginning of the bar and with a blue light to tell you each beat in between the bar on both of them. It's just really nice. And as I say, you don't want it, you don't use it. It's not in your way, it's not in your face, but it's there. And I think that if you're buying a controller like this, you're probably wanting to learn to manually beat mix. That's what the kind of jog wheels bring to that. But I think in that instance, having all the help you can have is good, because it's like learning to ride a bike manually beat mixing. It does take a bit of time. The way we teach it, funnily enough, is very similar to the way it's done on here. By teaching DJs to spot whether the tune is too fast or too slow, we've kind of like got a fail-safe little trick for that. Well, now you've got lights on here to help you, which is cool. So great jog wheels, great control over Serato, but a scratch DJ, one hand is on the turntable, the other hand is on the faders. So what are the faders like? Well, I think here the price of this thing starts to show itself. So look, this is a consumer controller. It's very plasticky. It's built like a consumer controller. That's not to say it's low quality, because it isn't. However, one of the things that's really important if you are a pro scratch DJ who hammers your gear is the quality of the faders. Now, these are okay. But what I don't believe is that if you were to absolutely batter this for 5 years, they would still be okay. They are just not inner faders, which is one of the brands of fader that does last the course. But of course, they cost a lot more. Now, you can take these screws out and get inside, and then when you do that, you'll also see they're soldered directly onto the board. So a potential weak point here in the faders for sure. So that said, if you're using this for anything other than extremely punishing intricate scratching, and if you were using it for punishing intricate scratching, Steve, our scratch shooter, tells me that it's not really up to speed anyway. It's just not quite got the finesse that you want right at each end here for cuts and crabs and so on. It's fine for everything up to intermediate scratching, but pro stuff, the fader's not got it anyway. So for 2 reasons. One, they probably won't last half a decade, which I'd like to see any controller nowadays last at least 5 years without getting a little bit worn out, because hey, they're not top end faders. But secondly, even out the box, not quite what a real pro scratch DJ might like. But look, that said, for everyone else, and I'm going to guess that's 95% of people watching this, you want a controller that's got moving decks and that's got really good control over the software, and it's got faders which are great for pretty much everything, blending, open format DJing, beat mixing and so on. They're good, but they're not pro. It's one of the places that it shows. Another place where the fact that this is not a pro controller shows is in the inputs and outputs. In other words, the stuff on top of it being a software controller. You see, software controllers are effectively very, very glorified keyboards. They're just putting information into the computer down that USB, and the computer is doing all the hard work. That's why they can go down to really low price points, because the less features there are on it, the less it will cost. It's still controlling the software, and the software is doing all the hard work. In this instance then, you're getting great software control. Your extra money is not only buying these wonderful turntables, but it's also buying a really well thought out set of features. So like, as I said, you know, you've got full color pads and stuff. This is unusual. They feel nice, by the way. These are solid buttons. These are really, really nice pads. Nothing wrong with any of it. It feels great with the possible proviso of the faders not being there for pro use. However, around the back of the unit, we start to see some of the compromises, because here we see the inputs and outputs. This is extra cost. Simply flat extra cost on top of everything else you've seen. And so maybe unsurprisingly at this price point, we are lacking a few things here. So power, this is a power brick. There's no power transformer built into the unit. I'd like to have seen a transformer in the unit. I always prefer to see a transformer in the unit. There's a small argument for USB-C power on stuff that can deal with just the amount of power that a USB-C can provide, but it's only a small argument. I still prefer to see a transformer built in. This comes with a brick. You can understand it. It's not an expensive controller really in the big scheme of things. So then we've got the USB here, which of course you need a USB. It's a controller after all, but then very, very little else. So the microphone. Yes, it's a microphone socket, so you can use a microphone with it. And yes, it's quite loud. We tested it here with a Shure SM58 and it's quite loud. However, that said, it routes directly to the outputs. In other words, it goes in here and comes out here to your speakers. It doesn't go anywhere near the sound card. So if you're a live streamer, then you're going to have to find another way of getting the audio into your laptop to DJ live stream from, because it ain't going to go down the USB cable. Also, there's no EQ or anything else on the microphone. So output wise, well, there's two outputs. There's an unbalanced RCA that we're using and a balanced XLR, but that's it. They're both the same master output. So there's no booth output, obviously no record output or anything like that, which is fine. It's nice to see this, because at least it means you could take this unit along and plug it straight into a PA with long cables and get hopefully better signal arriving at that PA than you would through the unbalanced, but it's pretty limited. Absolutely no auxiliary input, so you can't have any backup plugged in here. This is primarily a software controller that goes all the way through to the controls on the top. The effects, the filters, the EQs, everything, you're controlling the EQs and the effects and the filters inside Serato. There's nothing hardware going on here. Unplug the Serato software and you're left with a dumb box that does nothing. But what it does do, it does really well. I mean, really, really well. Let's have another look at the turntables themselves, because these are real pieces of vinyl. You can put any vinyl you want there, any 7-inch you want on there. They give you two slip mats, by the way, a thick one and a thin one. But let me explain to you how this works. So what we have here is when I press play, this goes around and it spins the whole thing. You can see the middle spinning as well. I can stop the middle like this. That's the equivalent to stopping the piece of vinyl on a slip mat. And I can let go of it and it starts again. This can be moved independently. This is the bit that's controlling the software. You can see on the software, when I'm messing around on here, that's the bit that's moving. This bit here is just for show. Turn that off, it will still work. So this bit here, I mean, it won't work because it doesn't turn automatically because that's the way it's wired, but it doesn't have to have the motor. So the point here is then that this bit here somehow needs to be attached to this bit here in order for you to have control over what's playing. Now on other manufacturers' turntables like this, turntable controllers, they have kind of convoluted systems in the middle here that do all kinds of stuff, but ultimately it means you can't just bung any old piece of vinyl on there. I could put any 7-inch I wanted on there. I've got a pretty niche Spanish scratch sounds piece of vinyl here. That is going to work just fine as well, or whatever you want. So you can instantly turn this into your unit just by getting 7 inches that are what you want to see on there, what you want to put on there, or printing your own labels or whatever. I mean, that doesn't appear on any turntables of any price of this type. So look, there's a lot of engineering and good thinking that's gone into this. Now, I'm no scratch DJ, that's left to Steve here at Digital DJ Tips, of course, who teaches our scratch course. However, Steve tells me that the drift is pretty much zero on this deck. And drift means that if you start at a certain point on the deck and go back to it, that it will always be at that point. In other words, there won't be any drift from the vinyl away from where it should have been. And it's often a bugbear with this kind of setup. Apparently, it's really, really good here. One thing I did notice myself, though, which is pretty normal, in fact, it's exactly what you'd expect on a normal turntable, there's a startup time, right? You press play and it takes a little bit of time for it to get up to speed. And that can be unnerving if you're not used to this kind of deck, because if you're using a normal, I say normal in inverted commas, a normal jog wheel, then you don't get that because the jog wheel doesn't spin and it doesn't rely on movement in order to tell the software how fast it should be going. Of course, we've already ascertained that that's exactly how this one works. So, whereas with a hot cue, it's instantaneous, that hot cue's on a beat and you can hear it. From that beat on this control, there's just a tiny bit of, it's not an instant start. Now, some systems like this with Serato have an instant start. That's actually very good, but you can hear it, it's there. Again, it's very normal, it's exactly how it should behave, but some systems like realize DJs might want this and have an instant start option. I'm sure it'll get added to Serato at some point for this unit. I would guess it would. There is a way around it, of course. I mean, you've just seen, it doesn't, I've explained to you, the platter doesn't have to be spinning in order for the music to play, and you saw it with the hot cues, right? This platter's not going round, right? So one way around it is where you want to start a song, either with a temporary cue or this cue here. You can start the track playing by pressing the cue and holding it, and then just tapping the play button in order to get the platter moving. Just a slight change in technique, really, that is something that you'd have to get used to using this. Kind of brings me on to what is out there that is like this, but that isn't this, and is this the best buy for you? Look, if you want to learn to scratch, if you've come from a vinyl background and you want to DJ on something that's got moving platters, if you're a canny live streamer and you've realized that actually having stuff moving on your live streams is getting people to watch longer and enjoy them more, then this is going to be good. You get the movement, you get the ability to DJ with real vinyl on real turntables, albeit slightly shrunk, that you might be used to from your vinyl days. And for all those reasons, and if you've just wanted this, you just want this, well, for all those reasons, go for it. Really nice, works well, great turntables, acceptable faders, really good control of Serato, with the proviso that you will need to buy a full version of Serato, trust me on that. But what if you don't? What if you're, do I need moving platters or not? Well, look, you don't need moving platters. This gear here, Pro Pioneer CDJs haven't had moving platters, as in they don't spin when you press the play button, for decades now. It's simply a style feature. And so if you don't need moving platters, there is another controller that springs to mind that you will want to consider alongside this. Now, it's very different in a lot of ways, has pros and cons compared to that. It's this one here. It's the Flex 6 from Pioneer DJ. Almost the same size, almost the same weight, almost the same height, albeit this one's got some cool feet you can pop out to make it a bit higher if you want. Same size jog wheels, more or less. They're very similar to the jog wheels on this Pro Gear. It has got even less when it comes to inputs and outputs, really underpowered in that department. Fewer controls of the type that we've seen on here, very thoughtful controls. It's just got kind of basic stuff. It's only got one color pads. So they're kind of some downsides of this controller. Oh, and it's got really funky knobs up here to control just horrible stuff. I won't go into that here. But that said, this is 4 channels. This comes with rekordbox. Not the full version of rekordbox, which is Pioneer's own DJ software, but a version that's far better than you get the Serato equivalent of down here. You probably never need to upgrade it. And so big saving there. And it also works with Serato if you want. So again, you'd need to buy a license, but this does work with Serato. And it unlocks Serato DJ Pro, which is a pretty fully featured version of Serato that this one doesn't do. So if money is important, and if you really aren't sure whether you need motorized jog wheels or not, take a look at this one, because it could just be that this suits you better. However, apart from those things, this is a very normal, ordinary controller. Yes, it's got nice jog wheels, but everything else about it just feels tired and underpowered, and albeit better value because you do get that software, and the software is very important. This, on the other hand, is special. This is really well engineered, really well thought through, very clever in the way it incorporates control over pretty much everything in Serato that you would want. Fiendish in the way they've used belt drive, and yet managed to get it to feel pretty similar to the way that the very, very, very best turntables like this feel. And so if you've got the money, you're happy with the Serato subscription, or you're happy using their bundled DJUCED software, and what you really want is this kind of turntable, you will not go wrong with this. You would pay 3, sometimes 4 times as much money for an albeit professional unit that just had spinning platters. The only other DJ controller with spinning platters anywhere near this price is the Tractor Control S4, and they're just completely different. They don't have the vinyl, they're just completely different. So really, this is your only choice in that price range. And luckily, you're not going to go far wrong with it. Don't expect the faders to last for half a decade if you're a pro scratch DJ. But apart from that, I'd say go for it. So this has been Digital DJ Tips review of the Hercules DJControl Inpulse T7. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please click that sub button. But more importantly, click the join link underneath. That will let us tell you what's new in DJing every week in our weekly email newsletter, and also give you special exclusive member offers on our courses and much more. So do go join. There's a link underneath. Meanwhile, from me, Phil, in the Digital DJ Tips studio, get good, get out there, make the moments. We'll see you again very soon.